Hi everyone, my name is Erica Giacomelli and I'll speak a little more about my essay Cleopatra VII Representation and Iconography, the embodiment of the Isis iconography as a bridge to her Greek, Egyptian, and Roman identities. Throughout her reign and her life, Cleopatra VII, henceforth Cleopatra, carefully constructed her own image, mixing Egyptian and Greek iconography, while employing Roman iconography as a well-paved bridge that would ultimately unite her Greek and Egyptian selves. The iconography Cleopatra shaped for herself was ultimately syncretic, a well-constructed mixing of cultures that would please Egyptians and Westerns in an attempt of gaining support for her political cause. Throughout all of this syncretism and mixing of iconographies, one characteristic emerges: how Cleopatra identified her persona with the goddess Isis to adapt her iconography to her various audiences, Egyptian, Greek, and Roman. In the creation of her personal canon that was customizable for the medium or the goal of the art piece, Cleopatra always embodied the goddess Isis, regardless of the audience that she was speaking to. Even embodying the Isis iconography, Cleopatra constructed her own canon that drew from Egyptian, Greek, and Roman canons. By using Egyptian iconography, Cleopatra could legitimize her power internally. Using Greek Macedonian iconography, she perpetuated her ancestry in a way that justified her claim as a female Diadoche. Finally, she claimed Roman political power by associating herself with great Roman leaders of her time, and by appropriating Roman iconography and symbolism in her own depictions. All of these attitudes and purposes are seen throughout the artworks that were created under her supervisions, having all the common thread that was the appropriation of the Isis cult. Scholars agree that Isis is an Egyptian goddess who rises from the Heliopolis or Ennead from the Greek word nine. Ra, the father of the Egyptian gods, gives life to Shu and Tefnut, that for their turn gives life to Jeb and Nut, that are earth and sky respectively. Through their union, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys are born, being two sets of brothers that are also in love. According to Plutarch, Isis is the one that, in Osiris' absence, often away for the expansion of the new civilization he created, watchfully stands guard over the throne, keeping Thephon, that is evil, away. This administrative quality of Isis would become important while analyzing artworks, as it is one of the goddess' characteristics embodied by Cleopatra on her reign. After the analysis of the three main accounts of the myth, it becomes clear how Isis was a key deity in Egypt, and how she demonstrated her great influence in Egyptian society, exercising dominion over several areas, such as lawmaking, fate, creation, magic, healing, salvation, gender roles, seduction, and many others. Most important to this essay is the pervasive characteristic of Isis being a source of salvation that grants redemption to devotees. The Isis cult was largely promoted by kings, particularly the Ptolemies, that used the cult of Isis as a means of furthering the popularity of their reign. Since Isis, Osiris, and Horus were the mythical guarantors of divine order, it was inevitable that the Ptolemies would capitalize on this tradition to secure their power and to build a popular base of support. As the advent of the Ptolemaic dynasty was bringing on Hellenization policies, language, and new customs, Ptolemies identified a necessity of supporting a cult that would restore the prestige of the pharaonic lineage and Egyptianize the Greek Macedonian royals that were brought on by Alexander the Great. This appropriation of Isis cult and the Hellenization of this Egyptian important iconography is visible in the Ptolemaic statuette of Isis and Horus of the Ptolemaic period. This faience sculpture is a representation of the goddess Isis sitting on a throne, holding her son Horus and preparing to breastfeed him. The image of Isis breastfeeding her son Horus was not exclusive to the Ptolemaic dynasty, and it was a recurring representation of the cult of Isis that was later imported to Rome, and it signified rebirth and resurrection. The sculpture depicts a traditional Egyptian motif translated into a Ptolemaic iconography. The jewelry in Isis' neck, the representation of the dress with fluid lines on the ankles, and the overall depiction of Isis' face are indicatives of this new Ptolemaic artistic style. In the sculpture, Isis wears a wig that was reserved for queens and goddesses of the period, that leaves the ears uncovered and that is secured by a headband in the forehead. The same style of wig is seen in some representations of Cleopatra that presented herself as Isis in flesh. On top of the goddess head, there is a three-dimensional hieroglyph that is the illustration of her name. That is a throne. Isis is sitting in a throne that resembles the one it is on top of her head. Cleopatra was not the first Ptolemy to identify iconography with Isis. In Remembrance of Cleopatra I, consort of Ptolemy V, Cleopatra also identified herself with Isis. But unlike Cleopatra I, the last living pharaoh of Egypt not only identified herself with Isis, she believed that she was the living incarnation of goddess Isis, a perfect personification of the goddess that brought order to Egypt. The identification of Cleopatra with Isis could have many causes and antecedents, being one of them the spiritual justification, as Cleopatra herself also married her brother, Ptolemy XII, and later Ptolemy XIII. As Cleopatra marries her own brother, the Isis cult is reproduced and perpetuated from the mythology to the physical. Isis married her brother Osiris, and the Ptolemy's dynasty had many consanguine and incestuous marriages. Her brothers are all overshadowed by her own endeavors, as she proves herself successful in ruling Egypt with a powerful intelligence, wit, and considerable political ability, that she could govern equally that of a man. One of the first sculptures ever made of Cleopatra is believed to be the limestone sculpture of a Ptolemaic queen holding a cornucopia. This sculpture has a later edition of a cartouche that is written Cleopatra's name. In this sculpture, the indicatives of Cleopatra's embodiment of Isis are clear, and they are referential for the comprehension of Cleopatra's persona. In this statue, the queen is dressed in a Greek-style dress, with a pleated breast that continues to the ground. The dress also has a front knot that seemingly divides the sculpture in two parts. The attributes of the dress points to a date in the 2nd or 1st century BCE, and the curatorial notes of the Metropolitan Museum of Art notes that the details of the queen's hairstyle suggest the identification with Cleopatra herself. In this sculpture, there is an indicative that Cleopatra aligned herself with Isis. Both Cleopatra's arms are down on the sides of her body, but her proper left arm is embracing a cornucopia. That is a Greek symbol of fertility and wealth that was traditionally portrayed during the Ptolemaic dynasty, that could also be linked to the syncretism of the Isis cult, as she is too the goddess of fertility. Cleopatra's life added similarities to the cult of Isis. Antony also participates in the cult as the embodiment of Osiris, consort of the goddess. Before the transference of Isis cult from Egypt to Rome, Osiris was seen as Dionysius and Isis as Selene. Dio Cassius writes, he posed with her 4 portrait paintings and statues, he representing Osiris or Dionysius, and she Selene or Isis. This more than all else made him seem to have been bewitched by her through some enchantment, for she so charmed and enthralled not only him, but also the rest who had any influence with him, that she conceived the hope of ruling over even the Romans, and whenever she used an oath, her strongest phrase in swearing, by her purpose to dispense justice on the capital. This characteristic is well seen in coinage. Before the Ptolemaic period, coins were not significantly used in Egypt, except only for the late dynastic period, when coins were minted for payment of Greek soldiers that served the Egyptian king. Coins started to be minted in Alexandria after Alexander the Great conquest, and it represented a new form of propaganda that could carry Egyptian kingdom's iconography for outside the country. Through coinage, Cleopatra transported the cult of Isis to Rome, utilizing Antony as her Osiris and the coin as her propagandistic medium. A coin that identifies the incorporation of Roman iconography for the construction of Cleopatra's identity is the one that has Cleopatra on the obverse and Mark Antony on the reverse. In the obverse of this coin, there is the depiction of Cleopatra's bust with a headband, with a ship's bow behind her, and the subscription Cleopatra Reginae Regum Filiorum Regum. On the reverse of the coin, there is the bust of Antony with the Armenian tiara behind him, and the subscription reads, Antony Armenia de Victa. The coin in question is a Roman coin, a denarius. However, it is a foreign queen who appears on the main face bearing her title, something apparently unheard before in Rome, as women were portrayed in coins but did not have the names mentioned. The names of the consorts in the inscription indicate that the coin was minted by them. On the reverse, the inscription can be translated as, from Anthony, having Armenia been conquered. This conquest is reinforced by the Armenian tiara that appears behind his bust. This object, a kind of hat or turban worn by the kings of Persia and Armenia, appears as a booty of war, and it is depicted as a symbol of the conquest undertaken by Antony. The translation of the inscription on the obverse is from Cleopatra, Queen of Kings and Sons who are Kings. This could possibly indicate that the donation of Alexandria had already taken place and that Caesarion, son of Cleopatra, was crowned king. The bow of the ship, as Cb asserts. The translation of the inscription on the obverse is from Cleopatra, Queen of Kings and Sons who are Kings. This could possibly indicate that the donation of Alexandria had already taken place and that Caesarion, son of Cleopatra, was crowned king. The bow of the ship is associated with Cleopatra because of the naval power of Egypt. Cleopatra is by no means represented as Antony's consort, but as a queen that is allied with a Roman general. In this coin, the importance of Cleopatra in comparison with Antony is a testament of the Isis cult. As the representatives of Isis and Osiris, Cleopatra and Antony would be equals on activities on Earth, and their importance would be equivalent. Cleopatra rises to be named in a coin, showing that she is equal or greater than Antony. Her dominance over Antony has been detailed in many primary sources. Balk writes that the Romans were offended that Antony seemed enslaved by Cleopatra. Her open hand in politics and war is noted by Hopper's analysis of Dio Cassio's account. He states that when she decided to fund herself with a war when it was breaking with Rome, Antony reluctantly agreed, and the dominance went for other areas of Antony's life, as she desires that he should be forced to look to her alone for the fulfillment of his hopes. The direct identification with Isis in coinage can be better perceived in the coin with Cleopatra as Aphrodite, with a diamond and a winged child, Eros, in the lap, with a scepter behind that has in its reverse two cornucopias flanked by ribbons. In this coin, minted in 47 BCE, Cleopatra is characterized as Aphrodite, Greek goddess of love, and a child with wings in her arms, probably Eros, that could be perceived as Caesarion, that was born in the year of the coinage. The choice to represent Cleopatra as Aphrodite derived from the coinage site, for in Paphos there was a great cult of Aphrodite. The royal scepter, which appears on the obverse, alludes to the dynastic succession, as the firstborn, Caesarion, would be the one to assume the throne after the mother's death. Roller clarifies that this coin is a reproduction of a motto employed by Arsinoe II, sovereign who seems to have exerted a strong influence on Cleopatra. Arsinoe had also been considered the incarnation of Isis, and this queen and Cleopatra were the only Ptolemaic rulers to carry the title of daughter of Geb, creator god, demonstrating Cleopatra's attempt to identify with her predecessor. In this coin, Cleopatra elevates Caesarion to the position of co-regent, although at the time she was married with her brother, with whom divided the throne. Thus, it is revealed, even if narrowly, Cleopatra's political ambitions. Through them, we noted that the queen sought to link herself to the dynastic tradition, to the divine field, and later to Julius Caesar, in an attempt to propagate a powerful image of Egypt. In conclusion, Cleopatra carefully constructed her own image through her reign and through her life. The examples presented in this essay show how Cleopatra mixed Egyptian and Greek iconography, while employing Roman iconography as a well-paved bridge that could ultimately unite her Greek and Egyptian selves. The conducting thread of the syncretic iconography of Cleopatra is the identification of Cleopatra's persona with the goddess Isis. In conclusion, Cleopatra adapted her identities to her various audiences, Egyptian, Greek, and Roman, through the employment of the Isis goddess iconography. In the appropriation of the goddess Isis in the creation of her own iconography, Cleopatra constructed a devotion of her that mimicked the devotion of the cult of Isis. This devotion would sustain Cleopatra in power and maintain her as the last pharaoh of Egypt, a woman that did not deny her womanhood, but instead used it and explored it in an effort to salvage Egypt from decline and maintain her lineage alive. Thank you.